The perpetual rain of Xerion Prime pattered against the metal roof of Camp Aurora. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the camp's perimeter, her gaze fixed on the dense jungle that stretched endlessly before her. 3 years on this alien world, and the environment still managed to take her breath away. Towering trees that reached 50 meters into the sky, a kaleidoscope of bioluminescent insects that painted the night in eerie blues and purples, and the constant, almost musical sound of water trickling through every surface. As she scanned the tree line, Sarah's trained eyes caught movement in the canopy. It wasn't the local wildlife. It was the Xelith. Their slender, blue iridescent bodies moved with a fluidity that no human could match, swinging from branch to branch with practiced ease. The indigenous species had built their entire civilization among the treetops, creating communities suspended high above the dangers of the forest floor. "Another day in paradise," she muttered to herself, running a hand through her short, damp hair. The humidity never ceased, especially during this rainy season. April on Xerion Prime meant torrential downpours that could last for days. Sarah checked her wrist computer, reviewing the data she'd collected earlier that day. As the field leader for Starward Frontiers' exploration team, she was responsible for gathering biological samples and mapping the complex ecosystem of this wild planet. But there was more to her role than simple scientific curiosity. As a former M87 Space Special Forces operative, she was also the de facto security chief of Camp Aurora. The memories of her military service still haunted her. Flashes of violence, of desperate missions on distant worlds where failure meant more than just a failed objective. She joined Starward Frontiers, hoping to leave that life behind, to find something more meaningful in exploration rather than conflict. And for the most part, it had worked. Until tonight. The communication device on her belt chirped with urgency. Sarah grabbed it, immediately recognizing the distress signal's pattern. It was coming from the nearest Xelith settlement. "Mitchell here," she answered, already moving toward the equipment shed. The voice that came through was high-pitched, trembling with fear. It belonged to Dr. Lirsha, the Xelith ecologist who had been their primary contact since landing on Xerion Prime. "Sarah, please. It came again. 7 dead already. You must come quickly." Sarah's heart rate spiked. "What came? Lirsha, calm down. What happened?" "Vorath," the Xelith whispered, the word dripping with terror. "The apex. It broke through our barriers. 7 of our youngest. Torn apart. Please hurry." Sarah didn't need to hear more. She sprinted to the barracks, activating the emergency comm as she ran. "Mark, Rena, gear up now. We've got a situation at the Xelith settlement. Hostile predator attack. Multiple casualties." Within minutes, her small team had assembled. Mark Daniels, their 34-year-old biotech engineer, was busy loading equipment into their transport vehicle. His tall frame bent awkwardly as he secured various sensor packages and prototype traps. "What kind of predator are we talking about?" he asked, tightening the straps on his field vest. Rina Takahashi, their resident biologist and field medic, was already checking her medical kit. At 28, she was the youngest of their team, but her calm efficiency in crisis situations had proven invaluable. "Dr. Lirsha mentioned the Vorath," Sarah replied, loading her pulse rifle. "It's what the Xelith call the apex predator of this region. We've only seen it from a distance, but it's big, nearly 4 meters when fully extended." Mark's face paled. "The one with the black scales and those talon-like claws? I thought they avoided settlements." "Usually, they do," Sarah confirmed. "Something's changed its behavior." The rain intensified as they raced through the jungle, their vehicle's lights barely penetrating the thick curtain of water and foliage. Sarah's mind raced with tactical assessments. The Xelith lived 30 meters above the ground, in homes woven into the branches of ancient trees. For a ground predator to reach them meant it must have exceptional climbing abilities, or had found another way up. They arrived at the settlement to find chaos. The normally serene Zealoth were moving frantically through their suspended walkways, carrying their wounded to safety. Several of the tree dwellings showed signs of violent entry: splintered wood, torn fabric, and dark stains that Sarah recognized immediately as blood. Dr. Lursha met them at the base of the primary ascent vine. The Zealoth's usually vibrant blue skin had paled to a sickly azure, and their large, almond-shaped eyes were wide with fear. "Thank the ancient stars you've come," Lursha said, leading them quickly up the natural stairway formed by the thick, spiral-growing vine. It happened so quickly. The Vorath came from below, using the waterfall's passage. We've never seen one climb so high or attack with such purpose. Sarah followed, taking in the devastation as they reached the main platform. The bodies of the fallen Zealoth had been gathered in a central area, covered with woven leaf shrouds. Even through the coverings, Sarah could see the violence of their deaths: limbs torn, torsos shredded. A tight knot formed in her stomach as unwelcome memories surfaced. Another planet, another species caught in the crossfire of human conflicts. She'd been ordered to fire on unknown beings then, told they were hostile. She'd followed those orders, only to discover too late that they had been peaceful, simply caught in the wrong place. "Sarah," Rena's voice pulled her back to the present. "These wounds, they're systematic. This wasn't random feeding behavior. The Vorath targeted vital areas first: throats, abdomens, major arteries." Mark was examining the damaged structures. "And look at the claw patterns. It wasn't just trying to get in. It was searching, moving from dwelling to dwelling like it was looking for something specific." A female Zealoth approached them, her movements hesitant. Unlike Lursha, who had adapted to human presence over the years, this one viewed them with open suspicion. "You brought this upon us," she said, her voice a melodic hiss. "Before your kind came to Zarian, the Vorath kept to the deep valleys. Now they grow bold, venturing where they never dared before." Dr. Lursha stepped between them. "Kaelin, please. The humans are here to help." The Vorath's behavior change began before their arrival. Sarah met the suspicious Zealoth's gaze. "We'll stop it," she promised. "But I need to understand what we're dealing with. Has anything like this happened before?" Kaelin's slender shoulders slumped. "Not in living memory. But our elders speak of times when the Vorath would become different, more aggressive, more calculating. It happens rarely, perhaps once in many generations." "It will return," another Zealoth called from nearby, cradling an injured child. "The Vorath always returns to where it is fed. Please, help us." Sarah nodded. Her decision made. "We'll set up a defensive perimeter tonight. Tomorrow, at first light, we begin tracking it." As her team worked to establish security measures, Sarah pulled Dr. Lursha aside. "I need to know everything about this creature. Hunting patterns, weaknesses, preferred territory, anything that might give us an edge." The Zealoth ecologist nodded solemnly. "I will show you our records. But Sarah, you must understand. The Vorath is not just a predator to us. It is the embodiment of primal fear, the shadow that has shaped our evolution. We built our homes in the high branches because of creatures like it." Sarah's expression hardened. "Every predator has its vulnerabilities. We'll find this one's—" That night, as rain hammered against the leaf canopy above, Sarah studied the Zealoth's records of the Vorath. The creature was indeed formidable, a reptilian quadruped with a segmented exoskeleton of overlapping scales that acted as natural armor. Its primary weapons were curved, scythe-like claws that could slice through wood and bone with equal ease. Most concerning were the accounts of its intelligence. The Vorath was described as calculating, capable of setting ambushes and learning from failed hunting attempts. Sleep didn't come easily. When Sarah finally drifted off, her dreams were a chaotic blend of past missions and present fears. The faces of those she'd killed in combat morphing into the Zelith victims she'd seen that day. She awoke before dawn, her body tense and mind clear. There was work to be done. The hunting party assembled as the first hints of light filtered through the dense canopy. Sarah had selected a small team, herself. Mark with his tracking equipment and prototype traps, Dr. Lirsha for her knowledge of Voreth behavior, and Rena to document biological data and provide medical support if needed. The plan is simple. Sarah briefed them as they descended to the forest floor. We track the Voreth to its territory, gather enough data to understand its patterns, then neutralize the threat. Neutralize? Dr. Lirsha's voice carried a note of concern. You mean kill it? Sarah met the Zelith's gaze directly. If necessary. Yes. This one has developed a taste for Zelith. It won't stop coming back. There are alternatives, Lirsha argued. Sedatives, relocation to a distant valley. With respect, Doctor, Sarah interrupted. A predator this size that's learned to target an intelligent species needs to be eliminated. Relocating it just moves the problem elsewhere. Mark shifted uncomfortably. She's right from a tactical perspective. But there's an ecological concern. The Voreth is an apex predator. Removing it could create imbalances in the food chain, potentially allowing other aggressive species to fill the void. Sarah acknowledged his point with a nod. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. For now, our priority is protecting the Zelith settlement. They followed the Voreth's trail through the sodden undergrowth. Even to Sarah's trained eye, the signs were subtle. A bent fern here, a scraped tree trunk there. Dr. Lirsha proved invaluable, pointing out disturbances in the local ecosystem that indicated the predator's passage. It's headed toward the eastern valley, Lirsha noted, examining a distinctive footprint in the mud. There's a network of caves there, formed by ancient lava tubes. Many predators use them as dens. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the rain finally subsided, giving way to a heavy mist that clung to everything. The relative silence was unsettling after days of constant rainfall. Now, they could hear the forest's other sounds, the calls of aerial creatures, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, and occasionally, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mark was the first to spot the trap location. Here, he said, pointing to a natural choke point where the jungle path narrowed between two massive rock formations. If it follows this route back to the settlement, we can intercept it here. Working quickly, they set up Mark's experimental trap, a network of pressure sensors connected to high-voltage capacitors. The design was elegant in its simplicity. When triggered, it would deliver a powerful but non-lethal electrical shock, enough to incapacitate even a creature of the Voreth size. The sensors are calibrated to ignore anything smaller than 200 kilograms, Mark explained, making final adjustments. It should only trigger for our target. They concealed themselves in a blind constructed of local vegetation, waiting silently as dusk approached. Hours passed with no sign of the predator. Perhaps it's taken another route, Rena whispered, reviewing the biological data she'd collected from the surrounding area. Sarah shook her head. It'll come. Predators are creatures of habit. A deafening roar cut her off, so powerful they could feel it reverberating in their chests. It didn't come from the path they were watching, but from behind them. It circled around, Sarah realized, spinning to face the new threat. The Voreth emerged from the mist like a nightmare-given form. Its black scales absorbed what little light remained, giving it the appearance of a moving shadow. Only its eyes reflected light, twin orbs of burning crimson that fixed on them with terrifying intelligence. "Nobody move," Sarah whispered, slowly raising her pulse rifle. The creature paused, its massive head swinging from side to side as it assessed them. It was even more imposing up close, nearly 4 meters from snout to tail tip, with muscle rippling beneath its armored hide. The scythe claws that tipped each limb scraped against the stone, creating a sound like metal on slate. Sarah took careful aim. But before she could fire, the Vorath charged. Its speed was shocking for something so large. In the chaos that followed, Sarah managed to get off 3 shots. The energy pulses struck the creature's flank, but seemed to dissipate across its scales without penetrating. "Fall back!" she shouted, throwing a light grenade to buy them time. The flash temporarily blinded the Vorath, giving them precious seconds to retreat. But instead of deterring the predator, the painful light seemed to enrage it further. It pursued them through the jungle, its roars shaking leaves from the trees. They split up, a tactical decision to confuse the predator. Sarah led it away from the others, using her combat training to stay just ahead of its lunging attacks. Eventually, she managed to circle back to the trap location, luring the Vorath onto the pressure sensors. The trap activated with a sharp crack of electricity. The Vorath convulsed as current surged through its body, then collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. "It worked!" Mark exclaimed as the team regrouped. "The voltage knocked it out!" Their celebration was premature. Before they could approach, the Vorath began to stir, its resilience far exceeding their expectations. With a guttural snarl, it struggled to its feet, clearly weakened, but far from incapacitated. "Impossible," Mark breathed. "That was enough voltage to stop a rhino's heart." The wounded predator fixed its gaze on Sarah, seeming to identify her as the primary threat. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, human and alien predator, each recognizing something of themselves in the other. Then the Vorath retreated, disappearing into the undergrowth with surprising stealth for a creature of its size. "We heard it," Sarah observed, "but not enough." Dr. Lirsha was examining the ground where the Vorath had fallen. "It's learning," the Zealoth said, a tremor in their voice. "It will be more cautious now, more dangerous." That night, back at the Zealoth settlement, they regrouped to form a new plan. The failed trap had provided valuable data. The Vorath's scales possessed remarkable electrical insulation properties, and its nervous system appeared to have redundancies that allowed it to recover quickly from trauma. "We need to find its den," Sarah decided. "Hit it where it feels safe, where it keeps its kills." Dr. Lirsha provided insights into how the Vorath processed and stored food. They are not like Earth's big cats that eat immediately. The Vorath drags prey to specific curing locations, usually dry caves with good air circulation. The meat is left to partially decompose before consumption. "That's disturbing," Rena commented, making notes in her datapad. "It's useful," Sarah countered. "If we find those storage sites, we might find the Vorath when it's vulnerable, when it's feeding." Mark had been quiet, working on modifications to his equipment. "I've recalibrated the traps. If we can't overwhelm its nervous system with a single shock, perhaps a sustained current will do the job." The discussion was interrupted by a commotion outside. Sarah stepped onto the platform to find a group of Zealoth in heated debate. Kaylin was at the center, her gestures animated as she addressed the gathered crowd. "The humans bring destruction," she was saying. "First, they disturb our forests with their machines. And now, they antagonize the Vorath instead of killing it. We should send them away before they cause more harm." Sarah approached, keeping her expression neutral. "The Vorath was already targeting your people before we intervened. Without our help, more would die." Kaylin turned to her, eyes flashing. "Your help failed. The beast still lives, and now it knows your methods." Before Sarah could respond, Lirsha stepped forward. "Kaylin speaks from fear, as do many of us. But driving away those who would help us is not the answer. The humans have technologies and knowledge we lack." The debate continued late into the night, but ultimately, the majority of Zealoth chose to maintain their alliance with the humans. Sarah couldn't blame those who doubted. She had her own concerns about their chances against the Vorath. The next morning brought a new development. A young Zealoth scout reported seeing the Vorath near a series of waterfalls to the north, an area with numerous caves that could serve as the predator's lair. The team set out immediately, this time with additional equipment. Mark had converted several sensor packages into motion detectors, while Rena carried specialized sampling tools to collect biological data that might reveal weaknesses in the Voreth's physiology. The journey to the waterfalls took most of the day. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, with slick rocks and sudden drops hidden beneath the lush vegetation. By the time they reached their destination, the sun was already setting, casting long shadows across the dramatic landscape. Multiple waterfalls cascaded down a steep cliff face, creating a constant mist that nourished an explosion of plant life. The sound of rushing water made communication difficult, forcing them to rely on hand signals as they searched for cave entrances. Rena was the first to find evidence of the Voreth's presence, a pile of bones half hidden beneath a fallen log. Most were unidentifiable, stripped clean, and partially dissolved by digestive enzymes the predator had regurgitated onto them. But some were unmistakably Zelith, slender, with the distinctive ribbed pattern unique to their species. "It's been feeding here recently," Rena reported, her voice tight. "Within the last day, judging by the enzyme activity." Sarah scanned the cliff face, eventually spotting a dark opening partially concealed by hanging vines. "There," she pointed. "That's large enough for the Voreth to use." They approached cautiously, all senses alert for signs of danger. The cave entrance emanated a powerful stench, the unmistakable odor of rotting flesh mixed with the musky scent of a large predator. "It's not home right now," Dr. Lursha whispered, their sensitive nostrils flaring. "But it will return soon. Voreths hunt primarily at dusk." Mark deployed his modified traps at strategic points around the cave entrance, while Sarah and Rena ventured cautiously inside. The interior was surprisingly spacious, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. Their flashlights revealed a grotesque sight: partially consumed bodies arranged in a rough semicircle against the far wall. Some were recognizably Zelith, while others belonged to various jungle creatures. "It's storing them," Rena observed, her scientific detachment wavering at the grisly scene. "The cooler air from the waterfall creates perfect conditions for slow decomposition." Sarah examined the arrangement more closely. "This isn't random. Look at how they're positioned. The freshest kills are furthest from the entrance. The oldest closest. It's organizing its food supply." A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. The level of intelligence this implied went beyond instinctive behavior. The Voreth wasn't just a powerful predator. It was methodical, perhaps even self-aware to some degree. They returned to the entrance to find Mark completing the trap network. "It's ready," he reported. "Multiple redundancies this time. If one system fails, the others will still function." "Good," Sarah nodded. "Now we wait." As the light faded, they positioned themselves in the dense foliage surrounding the cave entrance. Sarah chose a spot that gave her a clear line of sight to the cave, while remaining hidden from view. The hours crept by, the jungle growing quieter as nocturnal creatures sensed the presence of an apex predator and fell silent. The attack came from an unexpected direction. The Voreth didn't approach from the jungle floor as they'd anticipated, but descended from the canopy above, landing with surprising grace for its massive size. It paused at the cave entrance, nostrils flaring as it detected the unfamiliar scents of humans and their equipment. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought it would retreat, recognizing the trap, but hunger apparently overrode caution. The Voreth stepped forward, triggering the first pressure sensor. The trap activated perfectly, electrical currents surging through hidden conductors, catching the predator in a web of painful energy. The Voreth roared in agony, its massive body convulsing as it tried to escape. "It's working!" Mark whispered excitedly. Then, everything went wrong. With a strength born of desperate pain, the Voreth lunged forward rather than backward, breaking through the electrical barrier despite the damage it was sustaining. It crashed into the cave, momentarily out of sight. "We need to finish this," Sarah decided, signaling the others to hold position while she approached. She entered the cave cautiously, pulse rifle raised. The Vorith was there, wounded but far from defeated. It had retreated to its macabre food storage, positioning itself among the bodies, as if seeking comfort in its kills. Sarah took careful aim, but before she could fire, a small sound from outside the cave caught her attention, a child's cry. A young zealot had followed them, likely curious about the strange humans hunting the monster from their nightmares. The Vorath heard it too. With shocking speed, it bolted past Sarah and out of the cave. She pursued, emerging just in time to see Rena throwing herself between the predator and the zealot child. The Vorath's scythe claw lashed out, catching Rena across the chest and throwing her against a tree trunk with bone-shattering force. "Rena!" Sarah screamed, firing her rifle in rapid succession. The energy pulses struck the Vorath, but barely slowed it, as it disappeared into the jungle with the young zealot in its grasp. Sarah rushed to Rena's side, but one look told her it was too late. The biologist's eyes were already glazing over, her chest crushed by the impact. "Sarah," Rena gasped, blood bubbling from her lips. "Save the child." Those were her last words. Sarah gently closed her friend's eyes, then stood, a cold rage settling over her. This was no longer about protecting the Zealoth settlement or completing their mission. It had become personal. "Mark," she said, her voice emotionless. "Stay with Rena, Dr. Lirsha, with me. We're going after it." "But the child," Lirsha began. "Is already dead," Sarah finished. "But we can still kill the thing that took them." They tracked the Vorath through the midnight jungle, following the trail of broken vegetation and occasional blood spatters. The predator was injured now, moving less cautiously in its haste to reach safety with its prize. The trail led them to a different cave, smaller than the first but deeper, descending into the earth beneath the massive roots of an ancient tree. Sarah could hear sounds echoing from within, the wet tearing of flesh and the crunch of bone. "It's feeding," Lirsha whispered, horror evident in their voice. "The child." Sarah checked her rifle's charge, nearly depleted after the earlier confrontation. She had one spare power cell, but something told her it wouldn't be enough. The Vorith had shrugged off direct hits before. A plan formed in her mind, desperate and dangerous. "Doctor, I need you to create a distraction at the cave mouth. Make noise, throw rocks, anything to draw its attention forward. And then, I'm going to circle around and come at it from behind." Lirsha looked doubtful, but nodded. "What will you do without your weapon?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Whatever I have to," using the skills honed through years of special operations. Sarah found a narrow fissure that connected to the main cave system. She squeezed through, ignoring the sharp rocks that tore at her clothing and skin. The passage eventually opened into a small chamber adjacent to the main cave. Through a crack in the rock wall, she could see the Vorath. It had finished with the Zealoth child and was now resting, its massive body sprawled across the cave floor. Even wounded, it radiated lethal power. Sarah heard Lirsha begin the distraction, a series of sharp, high-pitched calls that mimicked distressed prey. The Vorath's head snapped up, its attention focusing on the cave entrance. It was now or never. Sarah squeezed through the opening, moving silently across the cave floor. The predator was still focused on the sounds from the entrance, unaware of the danger approaching from behind. Sarah had one advantage the Vorith didn't: the specialized combat implants she'd received during her military service. With a mental command, she activated her Tiger Tooth enhancement, a military-grade modification that temporarily hardened the structural proteins in her jaw and increased bite force tenfold. She launched herself onto the Vorath's back, driving her combat knife deep into the junction between its skull and spine. The predator roared, bucking wildly as it tried to dislodge her. Sarah held on, wrapping her legs around its torso, while her enhanced teeth tore into the vulnerable area where the armored scales met softer tissue. The taste of alien blood filled her mouth, metallic and burning. The Vorath rolled, attempting to crush her against the cave wall. But Sarah had anticipated this move. She released her grip at the last moment, using the creature's momentum to position herself for a counterattack. As the Vorath lunged at her, Sarah met it head-on. She grabbed its front limbs, using a combat technique developed for zero-gravity environments to redirect its momentum. With a sickening crack, she dislocated one of the creature's primary attack limbs. The Vorath screamed, a sound unlike anything Sarah had heard before, filled with pain and rage and something almost like disbelief. It had never encountered prey that fought back with such ferocity, such calculated violence. Sarah didn't give it time to recover. She attacked relentlessly, targeting joints and sensory organs, using her smaller size and greater agility to stay ahead of its increasingly desperate counterattacks. Blood, both hers and the predator's, made the cave floor slick, but she maintained her footing through sheer determination. The end came suddenly. The Vorath, weakened by blood loss and confusion, missed a lunge. Sarah seized the opportunity, driving her entire body weight into its exposed throat. Her enhanced teeth tore through the softer scales there, ripping open vital blood vessels. The predator's struggles weakened, its movements becoming uncoordinated as blood pulsed from the wound. Sarah didn't relent, tearing deeper, driven by a primal rage she hadn't felt since her darkest days in combat. She barely registered the audience that had gathered at the cave entrance. Dr. Lirsha, Mark, and several Zealoth who had followed them. They watched in horror and awe as this relatively small human literally tore apart the most feared predator on their world with nothing but her bare hands and teeth. The Vorath gave one final, weak twitch, then lay still. Sarah remained atop it, chest heaving, covered in blood and viscera. Slowly, she became aware of her surroundings again, of the stunned silence from the onlookers. She rose unsteadily, spitting out chunks of alien flesh and wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her combat enhancements were powering down, leaving her shaking with fatigue and the beginning edges of shock. "It's done," she said simply, her voice hoarse. Mark rushed forward to support her as her legs threatened to give way. "Sarah, my God," he whispered. "What did you do?" "What I had to," she replied, looking past him to where the Zealoth stood frozen in disbelief. Their expressions were difficult to read, their alien features registering emotions that didn't quite translate to human understanding. But even across the species barrier, Sarah could recognize the mixture of gratitude, awe, and unmistakable fear. Dr. Lirsha approached cautiously, stopping a few paces away. You killed it. With your body." Sarah nodded weakly. "It's what I was trained to do, in my previous life." The next few hours passed in a blur. Sarah's wounds were treated back at the Zealoth settlement, though she insisted they retrieve Rena's body first. The mood was somber despite their victory. The cost had been too high. News of the Vorath's defeat spread quickly through the Zealoth community. Many came to see Sarah, bringing offerings of food and medicinal herbs. Others kept their distance, whispering among themselves as they cast nervous glances her way. A formal meeting was called the following day. The Zealoth elders assembled on the central platform, with Sarah, Mark, and representatives from Camp Aurora in attendance. The discussion was tense, filled with untranslatable idioms as the Zealoth debated among themselves. Finally, an elder whom Sarah hadn't met before addressed her directly. "Your actions have saved many Zealoth lives," they began, their melodic voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "For this, we are grateful. But we must ask, why did you choose such a method to kill the Vorath? Your weapons." "Failed," Sarah finished. "Everything we tried failed. I did what was necessary to ensure it wouldn't harm anyone else." Kaylin, who had been so vocal in her opposition before, stepped forward. The way you fought, it was like nothing we have seen. You became something else. Sarah met her gaze steadily. Humans have been apex predators on our world for thousands of years. We've forgotten much of that heritage, buried it beneath technology and civilization, but it's still there, when we need it. The elder nodded slowly. We see this now, and it gives us much to consider about our relationship with your kind. The meeting concluded with an agreement. Camp Aurora would remain, but its activities would be more closely monitored by Zalith observers. It was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but would allow both communities to coexist. A month later, Sarah stood at the edge of Camp Aurora, watching a group of young Zalith cautiously approaching the human settlement. They moved with the natural grace of their species, but showed none of the fear their elders still exhibited. One of them broke away from the group, approaching Sarah directly. It was a female, barely into adolescence by Zelith standards. You are the one who killed the Vorath, she stated, her large eyes studying Sarah intently. I am. Our elders say humans are both saviors and dangers, that you protect, but also destroy. Sarah smiled sadly. That's a fair assessment. The young Zelith tilted her head. I think, perhaps you are like us, but also not like us. Different paths, same forest. With that cryptic statement, she rejoined her friends, and the group continued their exploration of the human camp. Mark appeared at Sarah's side, holding a data tablet. New assignment came through, he said, offering her the device. Starward wants us to survey the northern continent. Preliminary scans show some interesting biological activity there. Sarah glanced at the map displayed on the screen. Unexplored territory, new species, new challenges, and undoubtedly, new dangers. Rena would have loved this, she said quietly. Yes, Mark agreed. She would have. Sarah wiped away a single tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. She had saved the Zelith settlement. But at what cost? Not just Rena's life, but perhaps something of her own humanity as well. The look in the Zelith's eyes when they had witnessed her tearing apart the Vorath haunted her. That mixture of gratitude and horror. Humans, she murmured, more to herself than to Mark. Both saviors and dangers. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Tomorrow they would begin preparations for the northern expedition. New territories to explore, new species to catalog, new mysteries to unravel. That was the future she had chosen when she left the military, to discover rather than destroy. But she knew now, with absolute certainty, that she could never truly escape her past. The predator inside her remained, dormant but ready, and on a world as wild and dangerous as Zarian Prime. Perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Sarah looked up at the alien sky, where unfamiliar stars were beginning to appear as dusk fell. Somewhere out there were countless other worlds waiting to be discovered, each with their own apex predators and challenges. And humanity, with all its contradictions, its capacity for both compassion and violence, creation and destruction, would face them all. For better or worse, that was who they were, who she was, both savior and danger.